it started with being told that you're going to have a transplant, which was quite frightening, to be honest, because the literature you're given obviously tells you the worst of everything. So that was quite daunting. And then you go through the anxiety. Do I have a donor? Do I not have a donor? My brother and sister weren't a match, so I'm very fortunate. I did have options for a donor. Other people don't. So that's a journey. And right up until stem cells arrive in the room, that's a journey, because you worry, is something going to happen to them? Is someone going to pull out? But then once you've actually been through the medical element, then you have to go home and start picking up the pieces of your life. And that's much harder, I think, emotionally, because you don't have the support of the hospital. You don't have the reassurance from other organisations that have supported you up to that point. It's you just picking up the pieces of your life. And people look at you and think that you're well, and you are well, but you're just coming to terms with the fact that you've had cancer, you've had a transplant, and that will affect you for the rest of your life one way or another. So it's a lot of time all of a sudden to think about what you've been through, and you've probably seen things that you've never seen and experienced. You know, people who are gravely ill, and you've never probably had to deal with that before. So it's quite a daunting period of time emotionally, because you've changed, you've seen things you weren't expecting, and you've coming to terms with the fact you've had cancer. And obviously for most cancer patients, the fear is, will it come back? You've got all this time to think a lot on all of that, and everyone else is looking at you thinking you're well, and that's great. And they don't realise that you're kind of coming to terms with everything that's happened in the last 12 months of your life.
It was more so the emotional impact it was having on my family that affected me more than anything. I was okay in myself. Of course I was worried, I was nervous, I didn't know what to expect. Steph, my fiance, staying with me pretty much every single evening and night that I was in the hospital helped me massively. It gives you a new outlook on life because it makes you appreciate it. And certain things afterwards, I don't think I would have ever done before I was diagnosed. And it was purely because of that situation that I've come out of it, motivated myself to get better. And after I had gotten better, I just grabbed it and I'd said, look, I need to do things now. And therefore I have done it this year and last year.
When I was in isolation in hospital and quite often didn't feel well enough to speak to people, but could always log into my Facebook and you know, write a couple of lines about how I was feeling that day. And I'd get responses from people which was so encouraging, which really helped with my emotional well-being. And just the kindness of people and how many people were actually there for me.
Well, I cry a lot easier. Anything gets me going these days. But I think I'm much more forgiving and less judgmental than I was before, because I now realise that I look fine, I look well, but actually I've just been through 18 months of hell. And you realise that maybe someone else is going through something similar or worse. And whereas before, you know, you get caught along with the hamster wheel of life, and you do quickly judge, you make decisions, and you don't realise what people are going through. So it's definitely changed my perspective, sort of made me think about things, and it's also made me realise that there's a lot of kindness in the world.
Strangely enough, I found the transplant affected my emotional well-being far more than it affected my physical well-being. You know, I sat down with a doctor and I was told what's going to happen and what to expect. It's all about physically, how physically it may or may not affect you. And the emotional side of things, I just didn't even really think about that much. It was only really afterwards. When I got home after my transplant, I was a bit like, oh, what's just happened and what happens next kind of thing. I'd encourage people to have as many people that they care about around themselves, who they know will be supportive. I don't think there's any point in having negative people, you know, around yourselves. And also try and have some kind of routine, you know, just to get a bit of control in your life and just encourage yourself.
A friend of a friend put me in touch with someone who'd had a successful stem cell transplant 10 years previously. And he was like my saviour, if you like. They put me in touch with this person, and I had a couple of telephone conversations with him. And he was like this beacon of light, because previously I obviously didn't know anyone who'd come through the experience, and to know that there was this one person who'd not only come through it but 10 years later was still alive. It was wonderful to be able to speak to him, and I can't tell you how much that helped. That helped more than anything at that particular time.
One of the biggest supports I had was my wife Candice, and she used to come see me every day. Candice, you know, she did some crazy things by, you know, sleeping on the floor in my room, sleeping on a recliner couch, and bring me, you know, a few treats, you know, which the doctors didn't like at times, but it made me feel so human again, you know. Never see the negative side of it. You know, you've come this far to this stage where you're having your transplant now. The next step is recovery. And even though there might be a few bumps along the way, there's always your support there to help you get through it. And the doctors are always so knowledgeable in if you're worried or paranoid about something, they always give you the right advice.
I became very, very emotional. I started crying a lot for the least little thing, and very often it wasn't something that was nasty or horrible. It could be good things. The Anthony Nolan Peer Support Service, it's a new service that is being set up by Anthony Nolan. They're going to be able to speak to people who are either post-transplant or pre-transplant, who feel it would be useful to actually speak to people who've been through that. If I'd had the chance to particularly speak to somebody who was in that situation, who'd been through it, who knew what to expect, or at least could recount their experiences, I felt that would have given me a real boost, a real fillip to help move forwards. So when I read that Anthony and Nolan were looking to set up this peer support service, I felt I could, you know, contribute in the opposite direction.
Once you come out, you look well, your hair starts to grow. They kind of think that's it, and they don't realise that actually the transplant, you're still dealing with it. You're still dealing with the side effects of it. You're waiting, hopeful and kind of a bit nervous about the GVHD. You're still taking a lot of medication. You're still going to the doctor a lot and having a lot of tests. So it affects a lot of people around you in different ways, and that's quite hard to manage, because you do feel you have to manage. You want to protect people, and at the same time you want to make people aware that you're not quite as robust as they see you. At the same time, you know, it's coming up to winter, you get anxious about coughs and colds, that kind of thing. So it's a really fine balance between sort of reminding people I'm still not quite back to 100%, and at the same time reassuring people that I'm good and I'm on the right road. So it's difficult.
Yeah, I guess the main other person that's involved was my wife, and she was fabulous in the sense that she travelled, this is both pre-transplant and post-transplant, she travelled for 3 hours to see me. She was there for 2-3 hours and then another 3 hours, and this was by bus because she didn't want to drive. So her whole focus was, her life stopped basically for about 6 months, while her life was put on hold while she worked with me to get better.
I think something like the online Anthony Nolan community is incredibly helpful, because it's other people who've been through the same experience, sharing their experience, sharing their stories, which is, I mean, that identification is so helpful.